left many break down to depression, while others lead to undocumented sexual violence. Our Crimes and Investigations editor Hussein Mohammed delves into the world of sexual harassment and the unspoken story of sexual harassment.
The family is a projection of the state. If the family is under attack, the state is under attack. If the family is weak, a nation is weak.
You go out there for functions, there are politicians, there are dignitaries, there are people all over. They see media girls, they think that this is just an easy lay. Sure bet.
Sexual harassment is a big elephant in the room in media organizations.
If you silence the woman, you won't get extra rights. If you kill her, you won't get more days.
Girls are made to either give sexual favors to the managers or the coaches.
How many people know me? I am reporting a member of parliament for sexual harassment. What are my chances?
They have been hurting in silence.
I was physically, sexually attacked.
A silence that has left scars of pain inside the hearts of many.
I was once admitted because of the stress of work and everything.
From teenagers to professionals.
You think stories of sexual harassment are normalized?
Not what's between my legs, it's what's up here. And it's really frustrating.
Chilling stories that paint a society with broad strokes.
This is an offense that you cannot gag anybody.
My name is Hussein Mohammed, and this is the unspoken story of sexual harassment at workplaces.
And that's the conversation we'd like to have right here on Morning Express. And of course, your views are welcome. The hashtag is KTN Morning Express. You can also tweet, and my Twitter handle, if you'd like to reach me directly, is at Michael G. Gitonga. Let me introduce the panel that we're going to have that discussion with. We have Hussein Mohammed, who is the investigative journalist that is behind that particular piece. Thank you for joining us, Hussein. We have Caroline Kioko, who's a human rights lawyer. And we also have Roslyn Odede, who is an advocate. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. And let me start with you, Hussein Mohammed. What was the trigger? Why did you find it necessary to do this piece?
Well, thank you, Mike. This was a tough assignment because, as the name suggests, breaking the silence. It's people are not talking about this issue. The reason why we decided to tell this story is because for a long time, sexual harassment has not been told, and people who speak about it in different terms, like sexual violence. They use different, like consent, different jargons are used. But we decided to tell this story because of the huge number of people in the urban areas and the rural areas who are experiencing sexual harassment, but do not know where to go to, do not know what the law says about it. These people, these Kenyans out there who are struggling, going through the mental torture, the depression, they don't know who to run to. That's why we decided it's time to tell this story, a story that we need them to break the silence. And it was a tough one because getting people to speak about sexual harassment is not as easy as people think. But the few brave Kenyans who came out really told the story, and the impact was really good.
All right, and we'll get to the nitty-gritties of possibly why people find it difficult to talk about and the reasons behind that. But let me bring in Caroline Kioko as a human rights lawyer. Sexual, gender-based violence and sexual harassment is a violation of human rights. But do you find that Kenyans or generally the populace is not aware how serious a crime this is?
You might say that the populace is not aware, but most of the people are actually aware of how bad a crime this is, because they don't necessarily go, publicly doing some of the things that they would want to do to people. They have to pull you on the side. They need a private space for them to do such kind of things. That tells you that people actually know that they are doing something that is wrong. On the side of the survivors, they know that it is wrong, but the mechanism and ways of reporting it and sensitizing people out about what happened to them is what becomes difficult.
All right, and Rosalind, you're an advocate. Are there structures in place, legally speaking, that protect particularly the victim? And of course, we'll get to the division of who those victims are, but are there laws in place that protect people, and are people aware of them?
Now, sexual harassment, Mwangi, if you may be aware, is an act of power balance. It's a power relationship kind of event, so that the person who is sexually harassing the other has an unfair control over the person who is being sexually harassed. So you'll find this occurring mostly in relationships of employment and relationships where the other person has an unfair advantage over the other. So you will find in our laws in Kenya that sexual harassment is provided for in the Employment Act. It's provided for in the Sexual Offences Act. But the way it is provided for allows for gaps for exploitation. And the other thing I would like to say is that probably the authorities do not consider sexual harassment such a critical issue, so that there's very little prosecution of sexual harassment claims, and therefore those who are sexually harassed find it difficult to report, because when you report it, you find that you are the ball is shifted back to you, that what did you do to attract this unfair discrimination or this kind of harassment? Were you dressed in a short skirt? Were you looking too sexy? What was it about you that causes you to be the one to be targeted? So that the victim is actually victimized, re-victimized when they report. So we have laws, yes, but there are barriers to reporting because, one, it's a power relation. You're unlikely to be believed. Secondly, if it's an employment relation, you're likely to lose your employment. And third, the legal or legislative regime does not properly protect the victim.
The victim. All right, let me come back to you, Caroline. And what would you say is the biggest impediment? Because I'm sure there are laws in place that protect the victim, but what is the biggest barrier or hurdle that makes this vice continue, under wraps until we somehow feel shocked when we see the extent to which it is? What would you say is the biggest hurdle?
Like I said, structures for reporting. When there is a law, we have some provisions that speak about sexual harassment in workplace, and they actually penalize the act. But how do you get to report an offense when your workplace or the situation or the place that you're in does not have proper structures that allow you to report? And then we have also adopted blaming the victim. So what happens is, if I report and there's not a proper structure to protect me, then there's going to be backlash, There's no mechanism that will protect me from the perpetrator attacking me, tainting my character. There's nothing that will protect me from being fired by my employer. What if it is my employer who has sexually harassed me? How do I report that? How do I report that case if there is no proper mechanism for it? So what happens is that a lot of people shy away from reporting because they do not want to go through the backlash, and probably they do not want to lose their jobs, and they do not want to have their characters tainted in public.
All right, and maybe coming to you, Hussein, you probably have first-hand information and lessons that you learned as you are doing this investigative piece. What do you feel, number one, is a huge impediment to people seeking legal redress? And secondly, help us understand if it's a misnomer. We tend to feel as a society that sexual harassment is mainly towards women. Is that necessarily true?
Well, to answer your first question, is true. The biggest impediment is the fear of losing jobs, fear for the men now, fear of what my peers would think about it. So in every situation for both the male and female, there are challenges. I'll give an example. For instance, for the men, we spoke to the men out there, and for them, they say, imagine talking about sexual harassment to your peers. What will they think about you? I mean, what will they say about you? How will they portray you? And remember also the culture. I think culture for me was one thing that needs to change, because most of the things that people are doing is because of the culture. And talking about the ladies and the female, people who we spoke to, including the lawyers. Remember the lawyers, most of them, these are the people who, what will I say, they're supposed to be the defenders and the protectors of the Constitution. But we find the cases of harassment are many in the legal fraternity, and we speak to young people's, young lawyers who are making a niche for themselves, and what they say is that it's hard for them to pass to the bar. And now maybe we have two lawyers on the panel, maybe they can talk to us about that, because that was the biggest impediment, because most of them, they resigned, the fear of losing jobs, the fear of what the society will say, and this is ultimately leads to depression and the mental anguish that many of them face. Just to, a quick one on that, Mike, is that the men are the silent people. I mean, they're not speaking about this issue. No one is coming out, to talk about it. It's there, but it's because of the different dynamics that I've spoken about. That's why they're not coming out.
All right, and maybe I'll come into Rosalind now and maybe just to get your understanding. There's of course a huge cultural barrier that we have, whereby maybe upbringing and our socialization makes it almost feel that it's permissible for harassment to happen, be it from male to female, female to male, or whatever. What are your comments to this, and how do we overcome that?
Thank you once again. It is indeed unfortunate, Mwangi, that
Mike is the name.
Michael. Around sexual... sorry, Michael. Sorry about that.
No worries.
It's really unfortunate that crimes related to sexual offenses are actually crimes that are swept under the table in most instances. You'll find that, let's say a girl has been defiled, a minor, I'm talking about an under 10 or under 12 girl has been defiled. When this case is brought to the fore, you'll find a whole community coming together to try and convince the parents of the child not to report the case and to accept goats, cows, or chicken in replacement. And this is something that is therefore starting even within culture, leave alone where we have laws or elsewhere. So that crimes of a sexual nature have always been at the bottom of the rank, and no one considers it a defilement. Yet this is a crime that can actually ruin the life of a person. It can lead to mental problems all going forward. It can lead to sexual and reproductive problems going forward. So there are crimes that we really should take seriously, but it's unfortunate that the society we live in is one that does not recognize it as a matter that is so critical and fundamental that should be treated with a lot more seriousness. Now, when you look at sexual harassment, it is much more encompassing than just a sexual offense. Now, sexual harassment does not mean that there has to be sex or there must be some sort of penetration. Sexual harassment is broad because it talks about things like sexual innuendo, leering, sexually making me feel uncomfortable in myself and in my environment. So even just the comments you make when I'm passing by amounts to sexual harassment. The comments the way you respond to my posts on social media can be sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is now not just about sex, but it's the typification of someone around their gender and making them feel uncomfortable in their gender. And it occurs to both men and women, as Hussein has well said. And it's unfortunate that we do not want to talk about these offenses. When we were going around trying to get the sexual harassment policy for the Law Society of Kenya, we met a lot of resistance. And the resistance was around people saying, oh, this will be used to this will be used to bring us down unfairly. The ladies will just be reporting. And I put it clearly to them, it's not just about the ladies. Even young men in the profession are getting sexually harassed and need protection. And of course, there are safeguards in place for false and malicious reporting. So I think these are things that are it goes back to gender and gender stereotypes and the typification of women. Everything around me, women, is always transsexual. If you look at the political world, women who want to vie are always brought down around the sexual agenda. They will talk about their bodies, they'll talk about their sex life, they'll talk about their morals, they'll talk about the fact that I have a husband or I don't have a husband, whilst they do not do the same for men. And it's all around the gender stereotypes we have in the country and the kind of standards we hold up for men and women. And therefore, things when it's, because sexual offenses mostly affect women, and men who are the ones who sit majorly at the decision-making table do not take it seriously and are typically the higher offenders in this sector. So it has not reached the table that this is a matter that is critical and needs to be taken more seriously, and that we need more legislation around so that we can have more people aware and sensitized that sexual harassment is wrong, sexual offenses are bad, they have deep and lasting effects on the person who is harassed or assaulted. And therefore, we need systems and structures to address this issue at a more serious level.
Okay. Caroline, you said that, majority of Kenyans probably do know, that sexual harassment is an offense, but there's sometimes a fine line in the subtle way sometimes sexual harassment may come. Just like mentioned by Rosalind, it does not have to involve intercourse. Sometimes it doesn't even have to involve touch. Just take an example of maybe a catcall or a comment or compliment given to, say, for example, a lady. It could be viewed as just a general compliment that you're looking good today. It could be said in a certain manner that it turns to be sexual harassment. How do we draw that line between, say, a comment and a compliment, or somebody who's literally now going beyond the border of, to sexually harassing the other gender?
Well, as much as sexual harassment does not necessarily involve sex, it's not what, when you speak about sexual harassment, every person, and particularly the male gender, will come and tell you, this is becoming too much because every time I compliment a lady, that will be considered sexual harassment and she can report me. But there's a manner in which you can say, you look smart today, you look good today, without necessarily hinting or insinuating things that are not positive as such. When you are with someone at the workplace, why do you necessarily feel the need to hug them? If they do not want to be hugged. If somebody has expressly told you, no, don't touch me, don't hug me, don't do this, why would you want to do that? People even take it an extreme. Let's even forget the subtle ones that you're talking about. People take it an extreme higher where you're the, say, case in point, a common area in an office, and then somebody feels the need to want to grab your waist because they're trying to pass a point or make a point. How is that not sexual harassment? You're not that comfortable with everybody, and not everybody is comfortable with you. Every time you're doing something that is intrusive to the other person's privacy, it is bad. You don't have to be called out on it. It is bad. So the distinction and what people say is blurry is actually not as blurry.
Okay.
If what you're doing is something you'd not want somebody to do to you.
And Caroline, Rosalind, sorry. Rosalind, maybe just to get your thoughts on that, do you feel that there's sometimes a very blurred line, particularly with how we say things, to whom we say them? There's what's clearly sexual harassment, where there's touch, where there's clear, language used that's intimidating and harassing, and, but there's that subtle time where a compliment is given, and one may struggle to tell whether it's a compliment or somebody's going beyond.
Michael, you're indeed right on that. When we were launching the sexual harassment policy at the USIU, one young man stood up and asked that, now with all this being a law, it means we cannot even seduce women. And this is the age at which we are getting our wives. So how are we going to seduce women? How are we going to get our future wives? Because indeed, sometimes the line is very, very blurry. But when you look at the definition of the word sexual harassment, you are to an extent it is subjective. If your conduct makes me feel uncomfortable, then it is sexual harassment. If I let you know that I don't like what you're doing, so if I tell you I don't like what you're doing and you persist in doing it, then you know I am uncomfortable with what you're doing, and your persistence therefore becomes sexual harassment.
All right, and we'll need to wind up now. I'll start with you, Hussein Mohammed. Maybe your biggest lesson learned out of this, and possibly what advice would you give to anybody who feels that they are in a position of being sexually harassed and have not done anything about it?
For me, I'm happy that now people are breaking the silence. Now people are talking about it. There are avenues out there from the Office of the Ombudsman, from non-governmental organizations to the Office of the DPP. There are people who are out there who are ready to listen to this kind of sexual harassment. For me, I'll just give a comment to the people in the rural areas who are the most quiet people because they don't know where to run to. I think this is a high time to come out and talk about this issue. The moment we stop talking about sexual harassment, the more these cases continue to increase. So for me, my last word will be, let's continue to break the silence. Let us continue to talk about this issue. Let us keep the conversation going here on the social media, in all phases of life. And for me, I believe the impact and the impact of the story will bring out all the issues that we have discussed here.
All right, thank you very much, Hussein. Caroline Kioko, your closing remarks.
I will start by echoing what Hussein has said. When one person speaks, the other person next door gets the courage to want to speak out on a sexual harassment issue. Let's speak out, but also to the organizations, to the employers. You do not need to have 20 employees to have a sexual harassment policy. Even 2 people, in an office with 2 people, there can be sexual harassment. Put up sexual harassment policies, orient people on sexual harassment policies, put up structures that can facilitate reporting of sexual harassment cases. Then that way we can have more people have the courage to come out and say that I was sexually harassed and I need recourse.
All right, thank you very much, Caroline. Last but not least, Roslyn Odede, your closing remarks.
Thank you once again, Michael. I think I will call on the State Department of Gender and the National Gender and Equality Commission to come up with national policies to address sexual harassment, to address cultural practices that are repugnant, and also to stiffen the law around sexual harassment, and at the same time carry out sensitization so that we take this more seriously. Part of breaking the silence. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. That's Roslyn Odede, who's an advocate, Caroline Kioko, a human rights lawyer, and Hussein Mohammed, an investigative journalist who did the piece Breaking the Silence. It brings us to 25 minutes to 9 o'clock. Time for us to take a break, but we continue with international news after the break.